Welcome, everybody to Sci-Fi Distilled. Another week. Our guest today is Dave Galantar, who is best known for his work on Star Trek, writing Star Trek books, novels, and all kinds of fun stuff. Some of you guys may know that he also worked on New Voyages and did some work with us, so that's how we know him personally. So welcome, Dave. But tonight we are going to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981's classics, Spielberg and George Lucas collaboration. So welcome.
Should I watch that first?
You might want to have seen it. It helps.
You can do it from memory.
But, you know,
I've probably
spoilers,
seen 20
spoilers are okay. I think most of our viewers have seen it.
Now, we will just be talking about Raiders tonight, but of the trilogy, of the four, really, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I actually think that the third movie is my favorite because I love Sean Connery, and that was almost a flawless movie. The only flaw that I saw, and I can't take credit for this, a friend had mentioned it when we first saw it, was his father should have stayed and been the guard.
Yeah.
And that would have really put sort of the cap on it because it was his life's ambition to find it. And he made that set. Also, he could have come back and seen his dad anytime, you know? Yeah. So if they had done something like that, it might have been, but that's my favorite movie because it's just so well done.
Yeah, it is a really popular one. So Rizzo, before we dive too much further into Raiders, should we do our drink?
We got to do our drink, so I will get that up. Just hold on 1 second.
We'll do our toast.
And
we toast
it has been up on the thing. It has been up on the
And can you explain to people? So this is the family.
So it's called the family label. Now, if you remember when Belloc had Karen Allen in his tent, and they were having a little drinking contest, and she realized she says, "What is this stuff?" And he says, "This is I grew up with this. This is my family label." So this is the name of the drink. This is not what they were drinking was. This is just a drink named after.
Well, he was French though, and I would have figured it was wine, but it was clear. So
yes. Now, interestingly enough, here, since we're going to jump right in, here's a trivia thing. If you actually look at the bottle, the label is written in Arabic, and that is an actually real liquor that's sold in North Africa. And guess what the name of the liquor is called? The actual what that says in Arabic.
Family label.
Family label.
That's awesome.
So we don't know when he says this is my family label, is he kind of making a sort of a cheeky joke? But he does say I grew up with this. Now he's being French. He could have grew up in North Africa. Who knows? We always assumed that it was his family's vineyard. And a lot of people thought it was grappa, which if any of you guys that are Italian or Greek or any grappa was basically is a very strong liquor made from the base of the leavings of what you can't make wine out of. So it's like the sticks and everything.
North Africa, though, was heavily French colonized. And so I could see him growing up there. Especially if he's got into
a little trivia, because we all assumed that it was some kind of French wine or French liqueur, but it's clearly, if you look at the bottle, it's clearly written in Arabic, and it's actually a really produced liquor. So called family label.
Very cool.
So there's the first trivia of the night, folks.
That's good because I don't know any of the trivia except for the guy with the sword and the gunshot thing. That's all I know.
Right. We'll get to that. We don't want to jump too far ahead.
So put yourselves back in. Was it already 1980, 81? And Lucas and Spielberg go to lunch together, and to be a fly on the wall at that lunch. Here they are, these two guys who are both sitting on like really successful movies, and they're at lunch and they just concoct Raiders. They're just like, hey, you want to make a movie? Okay, what do you think? Well, let's do this. How does that work?
That's what writers do.
Well, I think they're both coming off, obviously Lucas with the success of Star Wars and Spielberg with the success of like everything he touches.
Yeah.
I think they both, it was almost like one of those things that, you got to put like when they take two great actors and they want to stick them together and see what happens. So I think there was some of that going on. But it's interesting when they originally, I don't know if a lot of people noticed, there was a lot of different casting. Originally, Tom Selleck was cast to play Indy, and he couldn't do it because he was just starting his show, which some of you might have seen, called Magnum PI. And actually, here's the really weird one. John Rhys Davies was not originally picked to play Sala. It was Danny DeVito, of all people. And he couldn't
That would
do
have
it
been a very
because
different movie.
Very
no,
different.
Danny
Yes.
DeVito had to do Taxi. He had a contract, so he
Yeah.
couldn't do it either. So I mean,
And
it was
they
just
had actually offered Deborah Winger. They had offered to her. They offered Marion to her, and she turned it down.
so it would have been a
Deborah Winger I
completely
can
different
see.
movie.
Yeah, she's got.
He
some-
would have probably been the only one that would have probably been okay to fit.
Yeah.
But I can't see the other two working. In fact, those that are Magnum PI fans might remember they did a Indiana Jones parody episode. So we kind of saw what it would have been like.
Well, he also didn't he also do he ended up doing a movie that was
Yes,
sort of
Count.
that,
No,
I
what the
think.
heck was something? Briscoe Count? No, that was the Western.
I don't think it was Romancing the Stone, was it? I
No,
think
that
No,
was
that
Danny
was
DeVito
Mike-
was in that. So if you
Danny
want to see
DeVito
Danny
was
DeVito
Mike
in that kind of
Douglas.
role,
but that was also
Yeah.
yeah, maybe somebody remembered. No, you're right. Tom Selleck did do a similar type of adventure sort of movie later.
Well, because the way Hollywood is anything that's successful, they figure can be replicated.
right, we saw several movies spin off of it. There was one, I believe, with the Alan Quartermain with
Yes.
come on, somebody help me out online now.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Alan Quartermain and it was
Yeah. Alan
I
Quartermain.
can't remember the name of the
that.
thing, but I do remember
Yeah.
that, and it was
They'll come up with it in a second. In the meantime, Mark Strock says Mark Strock is enjoying your background, Dave.
Oh, thank you. That's great. I did
Nice.
stole it from BBC.
yes. Just want to say hey to Bruce and Francois and Mark and Chris for all joining
And
us.
Roy is here. Roy was our first
Roy.
person in.
So, we appreciate you guys all coming by. So what I mean, for me, when I saw Raiders, it was interesting because I didn't go see it right away. It wasn't even on really in my radar because at the time I was big Star Wars everything, and it wasn't a science fiction space movie. So it was my oldest sister who said, I went and saw this on a date, and you would probably like this movie. So I went with a friend of mine, and it was the very last day it was going to be in the theater. It was, and I saw it, and wow, it was just blown away. So that's my memory of Raiders. Of course, yes,
yeah, so
Bruce, I'm going to keep calling it Raiders of the Lost Ark because they didn't add the Indiana
It's
Jones.
not
until
Indiana
later.
Jones. It's just Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, Dave, what is it about this movie that captured your imagination?
This sounds weird, but anything with Nazis and anything with ancient Egypt, I find fascinating. And to mix the two was awesome for me, especially as a kid. My father was a history buff and got me into history, especially World War II history, because he was alive during that. He was a kid during that time. And so I loved it for that. And I also loved the throwback because, look, we didn't have DVDs growing up or even VHS until I was, in my teens. And so, for movies anyway. And so, we watched Saturday matinees on the TV, your independent stations would have them. And they played a lot of those old serials that obviously captured the imagination of Spielberg and Lucas, because Lucas with Star Wars is very old swashbuckling serial, but with, lightsabers instead of swords. And it was very clear that the inspiration for Indiana Jones, or Raiders rather, was that sort of era of adventure movie, even with the plane going across the map and things like that, which are throwbacks to those serials of the 40s, late 30s and 40s. So it was just a bunch of fun, which you were asking, how did they come up with it? I'm sure they were talking about those serials and they said, I want to do something like that. Because Lucas obviously was in love with that.
Lucas, I believe, wrote it. Or at least the original. Lucas came up. Well, he wasn't a screenwriter, but I think he was the original, came up with the original idea.
The story.
Yeah. And then, of course, Spielberg directed, although Lucas did direct some of the second unit stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a funny story with the monkey where, the monkey does the High Hitler.
Yes.
Apparently that took like 50 takes to get the monkey to do
Oh, I would have taken all 50 and more for that. That was hysterical.
Right. So, but that they were saying, they always was W.C. Fields never worked with children and animals, is what he always used to say. So,
Bruce is reminding us that it was Tales of the Gold Monkey.
no,
Nope.
that was
No,
not
that was
Tom
a TV
Selleck.
show
Was
from
that?
ABC.
That was a TV show. In fact, you know who played
What's his face?
was the guy who played Captain Decker on the
Bruce
motion picture.
Boxleitner, right?
No.
Not Bruce Boxleitner.
No, it was the guy. Somebody help me out. The guy that played in Star
Stephen
Trek,
was his first name.
who played that Captain Decker.
Stephen Collins.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Stephen Collins. Yes, you're
That's who
absolutely
played.
right.
I love Tales of the Gold Monkey. I have it on DVD.
So did I. I loved it.
So
Did Bruce Boxleitner do a Raiders-esque thing? Because why is that name popping in my head?
Maybe was he romancing the stone? Maybe
no,
No,
that
that was Mike
no, he was
Douglas.
it was
Mike Douglas.
Mike Douglas.
We're all doing
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Not Mike Douglas. Mike Douglas is the talk show host.
I'm sorry. Right.
Well,
Michael
it wasn't Kirk Douglas. It was the
Michael
son, right?
Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas. Okay, whatever.
Mike, you got to keep it true.
Oh, no, we're on a
Mike,
first
in
name
Hollywood,
basis.
Mike and Michael are not the same thing.
Mike and I, we know each other.
That's Mike Douglas.
So, what is this? 1982 that this came
81.
out. So
81.
Oh, yeah. So I'm 10. So my 10-year-old eyes, this was like the most different thing. Like I'd never seen anything like, because obviously I'd never seen the serials.
Right.
I never got to see Errol Flynn like slide down a sail or anything like that. So to me, this was like, I'd never seen Boulder scene, the basket chase. Like to me, it was like, oh my God, this is so cool and different and awesome. But really, as usual, everything old is new again. It was something that had been done before.
Right. And one of the things you're talking about, the different the action scenes in this movie is something that modern cinema has gotten away from. Now we're like thrust into the center of the action where I guess they're trying to make you part of what's going on, and you don't see this nice linear kind of thing. Whereas these movies, you were always kind of set back and you were watching it happen. There was always
practical
references to what was going on.
They were all practical, not special effects. So
that too, of course, and that was one of the things.
Very few chances to get the shots, and so you better, you better have it all coordinated and everything, and you didn't do the jump shots as much and all of that.
Right, but I think from the audience's point of view, I prefer this type because maybe I like my action laid out for me. Here's what's happening.
I like it when my eyes don't get tired, and I find in a lot of modern movies there's so much.
There's too much blur.
So much happening.
Right.
Not that we're talking about Man of Steel, but one of my main problems with Man of Steel, other than not getting the character of Superman or Clark Kent quite right, was the end was just so much destruction that my eyes got tired. And your eyes don't get tired with movies like these.
No.
I know exactly what you're talking about. No. Yeah.
I think the first time I witnessed that type of cinema was in a movie was actually Hyde Connery in it called The Rock. And there was a car chase in that down in San Francisco, down the the hills, and it was so jumping all over the place. It was hard to get any point of reference as to what was going on. And I noted it at the time. Came out in the mid '90s, I want to say somewhere in there. And I think that's kind of when they started. I wouldn't say that's the first movie it was done, but it certainly was early on. And, I just, from then on, you kind of, I guess the director's eyes are going to thrust you right into you're in the action, which I don't necessarily always want to be. I kind of want to.
I think part of that also is between practical effects and CGI effects. There's a tendency to throw everything every texture they could possibly put in it, which can make it seem unreal, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in some ways, because I like movies to be a little unreal, but it, like I say, it hurts the eyes. You don't know where to look, and I like and there are movies today that are made with CGI effects that pull back and don't show you all of the carnage that they possibly could.
Right. And I want to actually, I think a lot of the current Marvel movies, I think are like that. I didn't feel as disjointed, and even though those are all CGI, in those battles, there was a lot going on, but you were able to kind of follow it because it was more like you're set back and you're
especially
watching.
The first Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, but the point is that again, they weren't using CGI. They didn't have a lot of so they weren't doing any of these fight scenes or any of these, they were in Tunisia for obviously all the Africa stuff. In fact, there was one that they had to take down like 200 TV antennas.
Yes,
Because Spielberg had to get that wide shot of the city right when they first get there, and they had to take down 200 because they couldn't even just digitally take them out.
Now they would be able to take them out.
Right.
Also, the ghosts in the end, or the spirits, the angels, whatever they were, look more ghostly because they're probably hand animated than computer animated. And I think computer animated, they would look, I mean, I don't believe in ghosts, but I think they'd look more fake today than they did back then.
Right. They had a more eerie feel to them.
They had a more eerie
kind of, it was all
I heard Steven Spielberg in one of the behind the scenes call it optical animation, which was kind of a funny, but he wasn't saying computer at all. He was just saying optical animation. So were they drawn? Or was it?
I guess he's probably right. They were probably hand drawn.
I think a lot of them were, or based on some camera tricks. But I know when the beautiful angel face turns into a death face, I don't know how they did that, but it was perfect and beautiful. I mean, scary beautiful.
I do know. I watched behind the scenes. Each of the Nazi soldiers had a light bulb mounted to them. And when his went on, and so it was in front of them, and the camera was behind them, so it sort of lit up in front. And then also the actor knew when his light bulb went on, he needed to die or keel over or whatever. So it was an interesting combination of practical and animated effects.
I'll tell you what, I wouldn't say it ruined the movie, but one of the things that shortly came out after, because when the movie was such a hit, there was the making ofs that came out, documentary shows, and once you saw how they did some of those effects, like when he gets dragged behind the truck, and they basically had built a trench for him to be dragged in, obviously the stuntman. Once you always see the trench now. Once you know it's there.
I don't. I knew that and I didn't.
I'm gonna disagree.
I have to tell myself not to look there.
I saw how they made the face melt, and I am still fascinated.
That was a time lapse.
So cool.
That was a time lapse of a wax under a heat lamp. Yeah,
layers of wax, painstakingly painted on, so that there was flesh, and then underneath the dark blood tones. Yeah. Oh, the work that went into that.
Basically, a time lapse. Basically, is what they did, and he sped it up.
Well, and just a couple of years later, Spielberg did, which was a similar practical and optical effects movie, Poltergeist. Scary as hell.
Yeah,
and
but a lot of practical effects in that.
And a lot of tearing your face off, and then a lot of the animation of monsters and ghosts and things. And
Caroline.
I mean, and you can tell it has some roots there in that final scene of Raiders.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, well, Dave Alfredo was saying that the sound design blew him away, and the gunfire and the hitting and the punching being so prominent. Yeah, I agree with you there, Dave. It definitely, there was, when he hit somebody, it sounded like almost like a can. It was almost overdone. But again, I think that was partly, maybe they did that. I mean, obviously to make it more action, but I wonder if, again, going back to those old serials, that they kind of overdid things, like, even almost to the the campy Batman where you get bam.
It sells it. There were some very campy lines.
Yeah.
Especially from Karen Allen's character. Why am I blocking on her name? Marion.
Yeah.
And also a little bit of sexism, sort of. Although I will say
it was the 80s.
It was 1936.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the 30s. Yeah.
It was the 80s. Look at the 30s.
The 80s look at the 30s.
Levels of sort of sexism there.
Go ahead.
She was not a wilting flower, however, for the most part.
No.
So, I mean,
I love the scene where he finds her in the tent, and then he realizes I can't rescue you because they're gonna know I'm alive, and I'm
you
here.
have to leave her there. But she
what are you doing?
She is cut out of Princess Leia cloth, isn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Lucas has a couple of fights.
Yeah, she was gonna escape on her own.
John
Williams.
How introduced to her? She's drinking this guy under the table in her own bar. Clearly taking care of herself really well. They established that the father died. So she's a tough cookie, right from the
Yeah.
right
Oh,
from the
clearly.
start.
I mean,
John
right from
Williams,
the
by the
get-go.
way, has a little bit of a similar theme for the love music between Indy and
I
Mary
noticed that. Yes.
with Princess Leia. I know.
With Leia's
Well,
music.
obviously we all know that, little Johnny Williams did the soundtrack or the
Little
score
Johnny
for
Williams.
both.
Little
Well,
Johnny-
that's what they used to call him back in the 50s and 60s when he was doing television, when he did like Lost in Space and stuff. They used to call him Little Johnny Williams.
I only know him from the Boston Pop. So
Yeah, well, of course he
He
became
started
famous, but
TV.
back in the day, he was just a guy doing music scores for TV shows, and he obviously got some street cred over the years. And of course now he's, but so yeah, of course we're going to see some similarities. I don't think the movie would be the same. Any of those movies, whether it be Star Wars, Indiana Jones, name one of the things that he's worked on would be the same if he hadn't created the score for it.
Agreed. And he's still alive and working, isn't he?
Oh
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite, like he did Empire of the Sun, which if you've never seen, that's another Spielberg movie.
It is. Good movie.
If you've never seen it, anybody's watched it. It's a great period piece about World War II in China, and the music is beautiful, and the whole
The kid in it grows up to be Batman, doesn't he?
right. The kid grows up to be Batman. That was right. It was.
I'm blocking his name.
I'm terrible. I'm having
Christian
so many.
Bale.
I must be like Christian Bale.
No,
Thank you.
not
I'm having
Christian
so many
Bale, I don't
blanks
know.
today. Sorry. But
I
you're
have to
right. Yeah,
wait
but it's a
for-
great movie. Highly recommend.
I have to wait for the comments, but the comments are behind because there's a bit of a delay. So
Yeah. So, but getting back in, so we'll get to. So we're in Tunisia. It's triple digit temperatures. For you Canadian folks, it's hot. Okay.
for the Canadians,
It's
it's
over
about
100 degrees
30.
Fahrenheit. I don't know what
No,
that is.
actually,
in
it's probably about
Celsius.
40.
40s.
But it's hot, and everybody's getting sick from food poisoning except Spielberg, because he insisted on eating canned food that he was shipped in from the UK, which is why I'll segue into the scene with the fight scene in the market square, where he doesn't end up sword fighting the guy. He just kind of pulls the gun out. And
Was that because he was sick?
because he was sick, and they had to he kind of came up with, like, we need to shorten this because I'm
He's like, I can't do it.
crapping my brains out over here. And yeah, and John Rhys Davies was so sick, he had over 100-degree temperature at one point, and they shot a scene which ended up on the cutting room floor. Thank God, it was where he was going to be shot by one of the Nazis, and he ended up literally crapping himself right in front of everybody because he was so sick.
Yeah.
So it ended up, obviously, I don't think they cut the scene because of that, but it clearly wasn't necessary. But the point is that they did change a lot because people were being sick and they had to, adjust.
The movie works though. You can't.
Oh yeah, you
tell
wouldn't.
that anything.
That scene became classic because it was so funny. Because how many times have we watched movies and we're like, why doesn't he just shoot him?
Yeah.
And they repeated it in the next movie, except he didn't have his gun.
Except he lost the pistol. Yeah. I noticed in watching it in the beginning, Belloc takes his gun and his whip. We had just assume, I guess, that he goes and purchases another one. So the whip, although I always thought it was like the fedora where he would never lose it. Apparently he lost it right in the beginning of the movie because Belloc takes it.
Took
And
his whip.
they took the whip. He took the whip and the pistol when he came out of the cave.
I don't remember that.
I just watched it.
I do remember it because I
How
watched.
did he get him back?
He had it in his hand. And then Indy took off, so we assume he never got it back unless Belloc felt bad and mailed it to him or something.
No, and when he's packing, the new one looks, or the other whip looks new.
Yeah, I mean, it's minor. I wouldn't call it a continuity error because, yeah, we can just assume he got another one.
Wow, I legit thought he ended the movie with his whip. How did I not know that?
Well, he does end the movie with the whip.
He just has
I'm
another
talking in the very beginning, the opening scene.
Oh, in the jungle. Oh, in the South
jungle.
American jungle,
Yes,
wherever that was.
Yes.
Oh, and so then he has a new
so-
whip to go to Egypt with. Oh.
Speaking of that scene, when he gets on the plane, did anybody catch the numbers on the plane?
Oh, I didn't.
Last three digits of the plane's number were CPO.
What is it
They were
really?
purposely put in there. That was Lucas for C3PO.
CPO and not 3PO?
It says CPO on the
Okay.
plane. It's the last three digits of the plane's end number. So just little. There's a ton of little Star Wars Easter eggs in there. There's
I
even
would
some.
not have seen that as a Star
There's
Wars Easter egg.
when he's in the map room. There's on the wall the what do you call it?
Hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics. Thank you. There's R2D2 and C3PO hieroglyphic on the wall.
I've seen that before, although I miss it in the movie.
Yeah, it's there. You'd have to blow it up and everything, but it's like one of the first. They consider it like one of the first Easter eggs before Easter eggs were a thing.
Well, Star Trek had the Easter egg for both Darth Vader's helmet and R2D2, I believe.
Yeah, well, we have actually. It's funny because there's a lot of Star Wars in the subsequent movies. In your favorite, in the third one there, we had the guy that played General Veers was the bad guy in Last Crusade, and he ends up shooting.
Right.
But he was also a bad guy in a Bond film. Who ends up shooting Sean Connery? So there's kind of this weird Bond connection thing there. But we're on. That's all in Last Crusade. So. But so there's the guy that played Hitler was also one of the admirals from. But another Star Wars connection, Porkins. Remember Porkins from one of the pilots?
Yeah.
He was the colonel guy that top men are working on it. Top men.
Oh, really?
That was Porkins. That's Porkins.
Look like him.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of little Star Wars connections, which makes sense since Lucas obviously worked on both films.
Porkins supposed to be his real name or a nickname because he was chunky?
They just called him Porkins. They didn't actually elaborate whether he was it was a poor nickname. He was a bit portly for a pilot. But
well, it was a rebellion. You take who you could.
Exactly. As long as he's wedged into the cockpit, I guess it didn't really matter.
Well, and
you guys, the poor guy died in that movie. He was pick up your visual scanning guy.
I can hold it.
The actor lived on, however, to be in Raiders. So
yeah, the actor lived on to be in Raiders. So.
And he was in Flash Gordon, as we had talked about way back when we did Flash Gordon. So
one of the things my wife dropped in briefly while I was watching the movie, and she's of course seen it before too. And one of the things that she mentioned was that the scene in the tent where she decides to put on the dress, she said you can see her wheels turning. The wheels turning about how she's going to get herself out of this. Right. And she appreciated that. She thought any other movie serial of the time, the woman just, not the 80s, but the 30s,
right.
40s.
Yeah, it would have been
waited.
Yeah.
She would have
right. Would have just waited. But she was hiding the knife. She was putting it. Yeah, I'll put on the dress. I'll play along. Right. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love the scene when the Nazi comes in and he pulls out what looks like it's like a nunchuck thing, and they're all like, he's gonna beat us with this thing, and then he makes it into a hanger and hangs his leather coat in the middle of it's North Africa, but we're wearing a heavy leather coat, whatever.
Well, you gotta dress the part.
Exactly.
I hated him.
We all did.
Although but that's a good actor. That's a good actor that you hate the role. But the irony of Hitler looking for the power of the Jewish God to help him, like that was going to work. I noticed as soon as it was put in that crate, and of course it started by burning off the Nazi symbol.
Right.
Yeah.
So it freaked out when it was in the hold of the ship, it was freaking out the rats when it did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, by the way, the submarine, that was actually fortuitous for them. That actually, they borrowed that from Das Boot when they were shooting that. That was a real submarine. It wasn't like
I don't know if it was a real sub, but they had built it for Das Boot.
Yeah.
See, I assumed that was a model.
No, it was fairly real in the sense that it floated, and I mean, I assume they did most. I don't know if they did that in a tank. Maybe somebody knows if that was. Spielberg doesn't like.
It was in the bay. It was in the water.
Yeah, I think he probably did it in the actual ocean. He doesn't like to.
My wife asked again. She was there watching part of it with me, and she said, is it going under? How does he get in? Because you don't see it go under, you just see them arriving.
I had that same thought. I was like, what if it just submerges?
My theory,
right now?
if you want to know what my theory was, he went into, if you know anything about submarines, there's a pressure hull. My guess is he went into that conning tower and either hid there so he wasn't outside, or he was able to sneak in, because there's many levels, and normally when they're submerged, they wouldn't be up in that part because there's no reason to be. So he might have been just hiding up there while, even if it did submerge.
Can you do that?
I suppose if nobody ever goes up there.
It might be why they didn't show it submerging.
Yeah, I mean, that's always one of the things that comes up when nerds start talking about this movie.
It was
and like
pre-war. They might not have had a necessity to go under.
Right. They could have. We don't know how far away they were
practicing.
from the sub. They
Well,
could
you
have been
can
only.
use it as a boat.
Yeah, they may have only been a few hours away from the sub pen where they ended up anyway. We don't know where they were. They were obviously somewhere in the Mediterranean.
Well, there's also no reason to waste the energy on submerging if you don't need to.
Yeah, so we can assume that maybe, but my guess is he was just inside the conning tower, maybe just outside the pressure hull. You know,
because I know that those pumps to get the water in and the water out are going to take their batteries or their
right. Well, when they're underwater, they're running.
At the time worked on batteries if you were under, and it had diesel motors.
Diesel engines for a surface running. Yeah.
Right.
And they would charge the batteries, of course, while they were.
That would be the good time to charge the batteries while you're.
So we can assume. We'll assume that they were on the surface the whole way.
We solved it. I'm telling you.
We solved it.
Suspension
we solved Indiana.
I do, however, again, one of the things I love is it's beating Nazis. I mean, how can you go wrong with a movie where you get to punch Nazis?
Well, Nazis are always the best bad guy because everybody hates them.
And we know they lost.
And we know they lost.
And we know they lost, yeah.
I mean,
and
so
frankly, what was Star Wars but space Nazis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can always, but that's even in any kind of modern, you can always period thing. It's always, you can always make the Nazis the bad guy. You're not going to offend anybody.
Nope.
Well,
yeah,
but
well, maybe in this day and age, everybody can find an offense about something, but
yes,
for the most part, they were a pretty universal bad guy.
Yeah, they are universal bad guys.
So,
yeah. So I'm glad we got to beat them up again.
I think that's also why I liked the third movie as well, is because we were back to fighting the Nazis as opposed to this guy who was ripping people's hearts out and setting them on fire.
The third movie wasn't Kate Blanchett. Wasn't she Russian or?
No. You're thinking of Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of Crystal Skull. Never mind.
We don't speak of it.
It was
well, you're right. We don't speak of it.
It was a blonde woman. See, I did not mind Crystal.
Yes, there was a blonde girly. What was?
Yeah, she was Elsa was the character's name. Yeah. I can't think of who the actress was, but
somebody will mention.
Well, I think the thing with if we're going to talk about all three movies, but the thing with Temple of Doom, I think it's underrated. I think a lot of people. I actually rewatched it, and I'm like, this movie had quite a bit of merit to it. It certainly was more graphic than the other two, but I didn't really mind. I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe I come around to it in the story.
People didn't. Kate Capshaw caught a lot of flack for Willie
Scott.
Can't think of the character.
Named after one of the dogs, by the way.
Named after the dog.
That's another thing Spielberg loved to name. Like Indiana, it was really his dog. You're named after the dog. Well, he really was.
He named the dog Indiana.
Indiana was his Alaskan Malamute was Spielberg's, and then Short Round, I think, was also one of the writers on that movie's was one of their dogs, and Willie Scott, or I think Willie or whatever was the name of another one of Spielberg's.
Another dog. Well, okay, so he has a thing for dogs. But
there's a whole dog theme going on. Did you notice though? In there's some really cool stuff though in Temple of Doom, especially in the opening scene, because Spielberg always wanted to do a Bond film. This was their Bond film. And that opening scene, I mean, with Indy in the white, and come on, it was even the way Short Round says that Short Round,
yeah,
where he kind of says it is very Bond-like. But did you notice the name of the club that they were in? It was called Club Obi-Wan.
Was it really? Oh, I didn't notice that.
I didn't. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, it's not the movie that I rewatch.
No, it isn't. So here's the thing about Doom is the way Empire. So Lucas has this theory that the middle chapter is going to be the dark one, like the tough cliffhanger, so that the final chapter can be. And so that is actually what he was trying to do with Doom. He was trying to make it a little darker, a little more things are not good. So then if they did, and he had told Spielberg right from the start, yeah, we're going to do 3. We're going to do 3. So he already had in mind Crusade. Well, but specifically Crusade, but he had a third.
Clearly, Crusade was great. I mean, there's no, I mean, like I said, I can't find too many faults with that movie.
I think my problem with Temple of Doom is he fell into the story more than in the other 2. I'm talking of the trilogy, because Crystal Skull is its own sort of coming back to things.
Yeah,
and I actually don't dislike Crystal Skull, because it felt a little Raiders to me, and that instead of a god, it's aliens, and the powerfulness of that, and so I didn't mind any of that, and I even didn't mind Shia LaBeouf. I don't know how you pronounce.
Oh, I think it's saying it.
Is that it? I didn't even mind him, although I don't know, maybe because of his off-screen personality, he comes off as kind of annoying. But I think the kid was supposed to be annoying. So I mean, maybe he was typecast.
Maybe.
But I would be absolutely fine with not seeing, if they're making a 5th one, they're going to have the son. I think Chris Pratt was mentioned as far as the age at this point, and I think they should go with that.
That might work.
That might work.
I
believe Harrison, actually, of all people, Harrison Ford is the one who said he'd be open to a 5th.
Yeah. No, it's in pre-production.
Oh, is it?
I think they would be filming, if not for COVID right now.
Great. More action adventure
where that goes,
to come.
Star Trek author Howie Weinstein is a big indie fan. So if you end up doing each movie, maybe include him for one of them, because he actually goes to Shore Leave Convention dressed up as Indiana Jones.
As Indiana Jones.
Yep. I'll get you in touch.
Well, and of course, we know that these 3 films were instrumental in the PG-13 rating. The time when
I didn't know that.
When Raiders came out initially,
the heart
when they passed the whatever the Academy that does the ratings or whatever they are, the scene at the end with the face melting and the other guys, the Belloc's heads exploding, they were like, that needs to be an R rating because it was so graphic. And then what they did was, you notice how there's like fire now in front of the guy when his head explodes? That was put in there to obscure the head explosion to get them under that PG rating. And then, of course, when Temple of Doom came and we had people eating monkey brains and the guy ripping his heart out, they were like, no, this has got to be R. And it was actually Spielberg that went to him and said, maybe you need something that's in between, and that's why they kind of came up with the PG-13 rating. Of course, when we got to Last Crusade, there really wasn't, other than the guy's heads getting shot. I can't think of anything too. The rats weren't that graphic, and trying to think going through the movie, there wasn't anything horribly.
There was not a lot of blood and gore.
No, it wasn't. Just the guy's heads getting chopped off and come rolling back out at the end.
And it was a little more comedic, I think,
right?
Ways than certainly 2 was.
But it certainly, it was, and Spielberg specifically was instrumental in getting that PG-13 mid-range rating, so that they didn't get the R rating.
So was
they didn't really want.
The first one was just PG, right?
It's PG, but I think they've reclassified it now as PG-13. Maybe somebody else can. I don't know, but I think I read that somewhere that after they came out with that, they reclassified.
I don't remember I was 11 when.
I'm pretty sure it was PG at the time.
I don't remember my parents having an issue.
I wouldn't have been able to. I was 14. It was probably right on the. When did Blues Brothers came out? 1980, right?
Well, Star Wars
that was my first R-rated movie.
PG, because my parents, I went with a friend, and his parents discussed it with my parents, and they sat 2 rows behind us. Make sure if there was anything we needed to discuss after.
Yeah.
Because I was 7.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm the oldest one, I guess, in the group there. I was 14 when I was.
Sorry, man.
No, I remember I went with a friend of mine that lived in the neighborhood. I think one of our parents obviously dropped us off at the big cinema complex we had in town. So we had like one of these 7-8 theater, which at the time was not that common, but
That was a lot back then.
yeah. And one of them had the big. I remember this particular is gone now. They've knocked it down since, but one of the theaters, like some of them were like a closet. There's like a joke. And there was one movie I remember one time where it was like one of these. They're making fun of one of these multiplex theaters, and somebody opens a door and there's like one person sitting there watching a screen. And that's the size of the theater. But this one had one of the big theaters that was huge with the big CinemaScope curtains. Have you ever seen like when they do CinemaScope? They used to do it. They'll show the previews and they'll have the curtains shut and you'll see them, whatever. And then the 16:9, and then they'll do, as the movie opens, they time it so that as the curtains open, the screen widens out to the full CinemaScope, like Silverado, because one comes to mind that was shot in CinemaScope. And if you don't see it full screen, you miss actually, because when they took that movie and made it for television, they chopped the hell out of it. They had to really to make it fit the screen. They didn't letterbox it because it would be like really tiny in CinemaScope.
And you probably know that the reason that older televisions now they're 16:9, but they were 4:3 because movies were 4:3, and when television came out, well, a little previous to that, movies ended up going to the wide format to try to get. So I'm assuming that because now we have bigger and larger TVs, movies are going to have to go.
Even wider. Well, nothing is still. TVs are still not in the CinemaScope width.
No,
so if you actually watch a movie in CinemaScope on a 16:9 television and it's not cropped, you will still see letterbox.
You do, and you see letterbox on it. There's something between 16:9 and CinemaScope, is there not?
There might be. I'm
Is
not
there
that
letterboxing on those movies.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not that versed. But anyway, we're off topic. We need to go back to Indiana.
That's okay.
They didn't come here to.
You're a writer, and this is a fun, like fast-paced popcorn movie. Is there anything about this screenwriting that inspires you, or that you could take from it, or that you're like, oh, I wish I had written that. Like, that was awesome. I wish I had figured that out. Is there anything that like really grabs you?
Oh gosh, some of the dialogue, like looking back, I noticed is clunky, but I didn't notice it back then as a kid.
I don't notice it now. What
wasn't clunky?
To
it was
you?
campy. I guess it was campy.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.
Just sort of, what did she say? I forget what she said, but she called him Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
Marion did at the end.
Yeah.
You'll be back, Indiana Jones, or something like that, or don't come back, whatever it was. And I just remember going, does anybody actually talk like that? But then again, maybe in the 30s they did.
In the 30s, maybe. It was a callback to her opening line. Her opening line was Indiana Jones, I always knew you'd come back.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah.
I guess see you tomorrow, Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
I think she's being kind of like wise-assy, like using his full name, if you want to call it that.
This movie has a lot of spectacle in it.
Yes.
And any kind of spectacle is something you want to live up to as a writer, and is difficult to do. It's difficult to make spectacle where someone would go, ooh. Certainly the ending with all of the, I know there's parts of it that are creepy and it's a very exciting ending, but that was spectacle. That was, when the lightning goes out and it's just basically like the drawing that he showed in the book in the opening, and it just kills all of the people, the bad guys for the most part. Although it saved, for the worst three who were doing the ritual around it, it saved the worst for last. Right. That's like, I wish I could come up with stuff like that, but that's hard to think of. And I'm always interested to see how did they come up with it? What were they thinking? And it probably helps that it was Lucas and Spielberg working together, because they probably discussed it. And I've worked with collaborators before, and what you do is one person has an idea that's good but not great, and the other person gets them thinking about, hey, but what if we changed it and did this a little bit? And then they might not even do that idea, and the first person says, wait a minute, what if it's this? And that's good collaboration, and they make good movies together. because I haven't liked some of Lucas's stuff that was just his.
Yeah.
I don't think he can write dialogue.
I agree with that.
But he's obviously a good director, and I think he's probably good on story too.
Yeah.
Especially
He wants.
complex story.
Well, he got the monkey to finally do the.
Oh, someone said in the chat it was a string.
Oh, was it? Did they have to use a string finally?
I think so.
All I heard that it was like 50 takes to get that shot, to get the monkey to do it.
You're burning a lot of film after 50 takes, so I
don't know for sure.
And back then it was actual film, so. But keep chatting, guys. We're not ignoring you. I'm just going back, scrolling through and seeing what everyone's been saying. They're talking about, they were saying, they were mentioning some of the other shows way back. I can't get it to go back that far. The one that was on TV with Bruce Boxleitner, that was the one I was thinking of.
Right, it wasn't Tales of the Gold Monkey, but there was another one.
Oh yeah, Tales of the Gold Monkey, something else, yeah.
No, I don't know. I can't remember anything with Bruce Boxleitner. I don't remember really, besides the Scarecrow and Mrs. Kane or whatever the hell it was. That was that detective show.
Scarecrow, Mrs. Kane, yeah.
It was
and then Babylon 5 are the only two things I know him from.
There were a lot of Indiana Jones type shows that lasted only a season or a half season.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
They tried.
There was a bunch of movies too.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of movies of varying quality.
They loved Crusade. Dave LaFreda says, "Don't say a bad word about Crystal Skull." He says they nailed the 50s after doing the 40s and the 30s.
Well, I mean, it was kind of interesting that they used, the Soviets as the bad guy again.
Yeah.
A dead.
Well, the
dead
Cold War. I mean, it was
defense.
80 when we're still in the Cold War, so of course.
Yeah, it was the 50s is when that.
Yeah,
the 50s,
that's true. But the current, of course, we'd apply our current to whatever.
Well, no,
Michelle
we
says,
weren't in the Cold War. The Cold War ended technically when Russia, Soviet Union collapsed, which is
Crusade was a buddy picture. Yeah, Crusade was a buddy picture, a father-son buddy picture.
Yep.
I was I had a writer friend who said that he didn't like Crystal Skull because Indiana Jones didn't move the plot forward really. The plot was being moved for him, and he was just sort of a.
He was no longer the same.
I don't know what it was. I don't hate it, but it just.
I think Raiders was kind of the same. He was going after stuff, but he kept, being sort of chased by the Nazis and stopped by the Nazis.
That's kind of the joke. If you ever watched The Big Bang Theory, they had an episode about this where Sheldon shows it to Amy, his girlfriend, that this is his beloved movie, and she's like, "Yeah, it was okay." And he's like, "Well, what?" And she's like, "Well, Indy was completely irrelevant to the movie. Basically, the Nazis would have gotten the Ark, and they would have opened it, and they all would have died, whether he was in the movie or not."
And that's okay.
But I said, no. My thing is, but the very, very end, he was killed because he would, if he wasn't there on the island, more Nazis would have come eventually and taken it back to Berlin instead of him taking it.
They were digging in the wrong spot because they didn't know how. They didn't have the head of the staff around.
Right.
Well, you assume that if he hadn't interfered with Marion, that they would have gotten the staff. Or they would have found it eventually just by randomly digging around.
I suppose that's true, but here's the other part.
Don't analyze it too much because it was a funny part of the show.
I'm
going to correct Amy because here's where Amy is wrong. You want to be Indy, okay? And so the purpose of having Indy in the story is for you to identify with someone and take you through the story.
Oh, no, I'm not.
You're watching it happen through Indy.
I don't think she was arguing that he wasn't, but they're just saying as far as the plot goes, he was... They would have gotten to the same point whether he was in the movie or not.
That's true of Harry Potter and the last two movies.
It's true of any one of a million movies.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a funny thing that they did. And of course, Sheldon was like completely pissed off, and he kept trying to find something of hers that she liked to ruin it for her.
And so he should.
But it was a funny episode, as many of those are. If you don't watch the show, I
have watched the show. It's a great show.
Yeah, it's great. I love
it's
the fact
on HBO Max if you guys have not seen it.
Oh.
Well, PBS runs it every night, like 4 episodes.
Yeah, it's on ad nauseum. So anyway, the reason why I asked you the screenwriting questions, shifting gears, everybody, I have just finished Dead Endless.
Oh, thank you. Cool.
I loved it. I will not spoil it, or I'm going to try not to spoil it. But guys, please go get this book. It's so good. I can say, what can I say? Oh, I can say they're going to go on a medical mission, a rescue mission, kind of, and they're going to make a jump and it goes sideways, and we'll go from there. That's all I'll say.
The sibling blood burn from traveling.
Yeah, the blood burn. Yes, exactly. Now, I don't think this is a spoiler. I would like to just talk to you really quick about the personnel on the Glen.
Well, that's kind of a spoiler.
It's kind of a spoiler.
The personnel on the Glen are mostly names of either people I know online or people I know at work. And one of the people on the Glen is who's on the Glen in the Star Trek Online game. The captain of the Glen is the captain. Deb Underwood is the captain on Star Trek Online.
Oh, okay.
Which I do not play.
Is that the wrong ship? Is it the Hood? Am I thinking the Hood? No, I'm thinking of the Glen. I think it was the Glen. Maybe I got it wrong. Did you have, so you know another Rutkowski in real life?
No.
Oh, you don't?
Who do you think that is?
Maybe.
Wow, that's
Guys,
impressive.
page 286 if you want to check it out for yourself.
And by the way, it would have been really difficult if the name was Smith, but it's also an interesting name, and that helps. You don't want every name that you put in a book to be meh. You want them to be interesting names.
You don't want Brown Jones. Yeah, Smith, Brown, and Jones.
Right, exactly. You want and it's a good name. I actually work with a doctor whose name is Viswanathan, and so that's why I used. And by the way, she found out about it. Somebody told her, and you know, you never know, is somebody going to be upset? And she said, "If I buy a copy, will you sign it?" I'm like, sure. Thankfully. But that's a good name too, you know, and they're just good names.
And see, that's a particularly cool futuristic name, because I'm imagining the future to be like
I think it's Indian, actually.
Indian, yeah. Because I guess I am imagining the future to be more ethnic, but maybe.
Well, multicultural, and I mean,
Multicultural.
people from Earth are going to be from, you know, well, people from Earth are from all places over the Earth. And I think that's why the Discovery crew. I will say this about the book that isn't a spoiler: it takes place almost exclusively on the Discovery.
Yeah, it does.
And I don't think they've had a book yet that really takes place so much on the Discovery, as much as this one, because the other books either are sort of prequels or, you know, they have a frame that has the Discovery in it, but this ship is actually, or this story actually takes place on the Discovery over a period of about, I want to say, if I had to think about it, the first few chapters are over several days, and then when you get into the meat of the story, it's probably 5 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of one time frame.
Yeah.
I am in awe of your brain. How do you?
Where did I put it then? Can you tell me?
I'm in awe of your brain, like the mapping. Like I imagine you had a big like chalkboard or bulletin board and like lines and circles and mapping and like, okay, this is the timeline and this is how this works and this is where this person is, but this is where this other person is. Like how do you keep it all straight?
I watched what was available of Discovery, probably 6 times each episode.
Whoa, yeah.
Part of that, just while writing the book, I'd obviously seen them as they aired, and I got the scripts early for this. So I had actually read season 2 before it aired, which, by the way, nothing was more difficult for me. I'd signed obviously an NDA to every time somebody said that Arium was the Borg, I wanted to strangle them. And
we didn't know. You have to forgive us. We didn't know as we were watching. We were just.
I know, but come on, the Borg existed in Star Trek canon long before.
I did love what you did with her in this. Thank you for giving her a little more exposure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
I
actually
suggested
to them after I read the scripts. Which, by the way, the reason this book is set when and where it's set, and I won't say more about that if you haven't read it, um, uh, uh, is because there's no breathing room within the story of season 2. I would have loved to have used Pike and Spock, but there's no breathing room to have. I could have had a story. There was a 3-day break somewhere. I could have set a story there, not hard, but I would have had to write in all of the emotional stuff that was going on, add my own, and then come back to what was there. And I said to them, this isn't possible. Kirsten Beyer, who was the story editor for season 2 and the writers, and she was the one who suggested, how about this? And I had said, can I do a story on Arium? And she said, you know what? I think we need to explain Culber and Stamets a little more. And I said, yeah, we do. Especially because while they didn't give Arium enough in season 2 to really get to know her, and so I added more in the book, Culber and Stamets really needed some explanation as to what their story was about. And so that was my mission with Kirsten, and we spent, let's say, an hour and a half, 2 hours, just sort of mapping it out. And I couldn't tell you, again, with good collaborators, you don't know where your ideas end and theirs begin, and vice versa. And then I mapped it all out and sent a proposal, and she was like, yeah, this works. Let's do that.
It's amazing. It's amazing. If you guys don't already have it, go buy it.
And Dave has other books too, by the way, that I've read that are excellent. So. And
Dave's other books too. Yep. Yeah. This was awesome.
And by the way, having been on the set tour in Ticonderoga, New York, it helps the other books, which were set on the original 5-year mission of the Enterprise under Kirk. It helps to have been there because I can count steps from places.
I remember when we talked about that. When all the authors came up, we talked about that.
Yeah, the other authors kind of had the same thing, that it helps.
Yeah, the same thing. They help
things
to
where
actually
they should be spatially and
sit and turn and look and know that that's one station. You can look and that's the other station. Yeah.
And it helps. It helps, especially in the movements of Kirk and Spock, which are so integral to that bridge, and they're so connected with each other. And there has to be, both of those actors were very good with putting motion into their acting,